Hello everybody, Blue Dooley, and we are on part 3 of the transmission swap. And that transfer case was a son of a bitch. James and I tried to get it hooked up when we put the engine and transmission back in the truck. Not last weekend, but the weekend prior to that. It slipped off the jack, tore the gasket, so I had to order a new gasket. The following weekend, it was his birthday, and his son decided to do a kind of a swan dive off the playground set, so James had to catch him before he hit his head. Threw out his back, so I didn't have any help last weekend. I gave it 5 good attempts, and when you're by yourself, you just can't balance that transfer case on the floor jack and get it up and scoot it in. It's just a pain in the ass. We got it first try today because we finally figured out how to get it on the jack, where to be. And we actually took the transmission mount out, lowered the transmission a bit, and that got us the little bit of wiggle room we needed to get the damn thing hooked up. So in this video, I didn't get much video shot of that, but I'll show you us struggling previous attempts. We'll go over some wiring. We're going to hook up some gauges, do some custom gauge install, which isn't going to be super pretty, because I'm not really good at that detail stuff. I'm going to try to make it look good. So let's dive into part 3, and hopefully part 3 also includes starting the goddamn truck and taking it for a test drive. Fingers crossed. Alright, I gotta find a place. There we go. So this is the 3x2 square tubing. I got it between the body mount and the lower radiator support. We just dropped the engine down far enough to clear that front radiator support. And you know, without that pesky transfer case in the way, there's all kinds of room to get this Allison fed in there like it was almost made for it. We don't actually, it doesn't look like we're gonna have to tip the cab up anymore. We might have to, just so we can get this hook underneath there. But so far, we're doing pretty good. We still have the come along hooked up to the engine stand now, jammed up against the door, and we're slowly walking it in with the come along. And between the two of us, that actually is working really good since the truck's at a bit of an angle. It did rest up on the valve cover for a little bit just to get it in here, but it balanced pretty good. So far so good. We'll get her pushed in the rest of the way and see how that goes. Got the transmission and the engine back in place. The engine sitting on the engine mounts. We'll just have to tighten those bolts up that connect it to the frame. The transmission is sitting on its transmission mount. It reuses the same bolts off the NV4500 transmission mount, which I thought was a little strange. And then the plate that actually goes, the adapter here, one of the holes is about 1/4 of a bolt off. So I don't know if maybe they just drilled it in the wrong spot, or this truck's just a little goofy. But surprisingly, no trimming is needed at all. Woo! Right? She just fits in like a glove. Except unfortunately, I was a dumbass and left the transfer case out in the sun, so it's probably hotter than hell. That's the last thing we need to do, is get the adapter in the splines and then get it in here. And then I will drill that hole out probably tomorrow. And I think I might want a little bit tougher bolt.
Yeah.
Because these little guys, I mean, they're a little short too, and didn't come with lock washers, so I probably will double check the directions. But we need to wipe this off. We got a little scratch right here, so I might put a little RTV on it and get that gasket in, get the transfer case in, and well, the hard shit's done. At least the big heavy shit will be finished. Now it'll be the fun little detail stuff. Okay.
Now where do we lift this up on?
Well, it'll probably have to go on this nubby right here in the center.
The
This thing right here.
right there. So okay. So okay.
Don't think we got it on there far enough.
No.
Let's get it. Okay, can you pick up that side?
I sure can.
And we'll kind of walk it.
Oh, okay. So you want it more
We gotta go more with your way.
my way?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
So like right.
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay. Dear Lord, thank you for long legs.
Right.
Oh, sorry. Somebody walked by and I'd be like, what the hell are they doing?
Right.
Ow. Oh, we're cutting that there. How's, ooh.
I don't know if this is gonna work or not. We did not get it very centered at all, did we?
Yeah, but once we get it around the exhaust, we should be able to kind of wiggle it around, right?
Hopefully. We gotta go. Woo!
Woo!
Okay, which way doesn't want to fall?
Oh, okay, hold on.
I don't think we're on the jack hardly at all. In all actuality, it didn't take a lot of time to get the transfer case in, but we wasted so much time trying to get it in. The weekend we got the engine in, the transmission in the truck, we decided we had enough time. It was still pretty decent weather-wise that we decided we'd try to get it in, and that way all the big heavy stuff's done and all that's left is wiring and linkages. That transfer case fought us every step of the way. We fought it for probably a good 3-4 hours the day you're seeing the day this video was shot. I tried most of the Sunday the following weekend by myself to get it in there. I should have just waited for James to be around to help me and not tried to do it myself. I could have gotten so much other work done on the truck instead of fighting with that damn transfer case. It did slip on us and actually tore that gasket, so I had to wait a week to get a new gasket in. The following weekend was James's birthday, and he hurt himself, as I mentioned in the intro, trying to catch his kid before his little kid hit his head on the ground jumping off the playground. Tweaked his back, so he didn't have a very good birthday weekend. The following weekend he came by for a little bit. We managed to get the transmission off its mount, lowered down a little bit, and that gave a little bit more wiggle room to get the adapter that goes basically inside that big aluminum donut. Is a steel adapter to adapt the output shaft of the Allison to the input shaft of the transfer case. And that's kind of why that adapter is so long, is that you needed room for the actual driveline adapter in there. And it's a snug fit, so definitely took a little swearing. Well, actually a lot of swearing and some wiggling. As you can see there, the transfer case just decided, nope, I'm going to come off the jack. So we finally figured out how to get it strapped to the jack so it would kind of stay in place a little better. As I mentioned, we got the transmission lowered off of its mount. That it all kind of worked together, and a little bit more swearing. Also, we weren't already hot and tired when we went to do it. Basically 2 weekends after getting the engine and transmission in. That was the first thing we did, was get the jack out, get the transfer case on it, get it in the truck. So we weren't hot and tired while we were trying to fight with that transfer case. James is in a little better shape than I am, but that transfer case, the case is aluminum, but all the stuff inside it is hardened steel. So I don't know how much it weighs. The two of us together couldn't just bench press it up and get it in there that way. There's just no man handling it. We did have to do some custom exhaust work, as seen here in a picture in a bit. My mistake in building my exhaust was welding everything together. And my welds are pretty good. They're not pretty, but they hold together. So we actually had to run a ratchet strap from around the muffler to my wife's Jeep cross member and actually ratchet that muffler over enough to get it the rest of the way into the truck. We got the transmission, or the transfer case is held in with one bolt and it's on the output shaft. The problem is now we're touching the muffler. So I got to get a ratchet strap to pull the muffler and the tail housing on the transfer case to the passenger side of the truck so we can get bolt up here started so we can hopefully get this thing worked into place. But this is try number 20 something. Hooray, we finally got it connected. Woo! So this strap runs over to the wife's Jeep so I could pull the muffler out of the way, because it's a little snug. And you also need a very stumpy ratchet to get into some of these bolts, unless you take the exhaust completely out of the way. It's a bit of a tight fit on this side. So I put Loctite on it, and we're just going to tighten them by hand as tight as we can get them. But James has got a couple on his side. I think he's working on the top right now. So finally got the transfer case in, and then we'll jack it up and get the transmission mount back in place. And we'll finally have all the heavy shit done. Woo! This hole lined up just fine. This hole, as you can see, did not. So we'll have to get in here with a drill and put a hole in it so we can bolt the other side down. But the transfer case is in. I need to change this seal, and then we can get the drive shafts in. And then the fun part is figuring out how to get the dipstick in the transmission. Because it can either go on this side or the other side, and the directions are vague. It just says dipstick can go on either side of transmission. And the transmission cooler line still. But those are conveniently labeled right here in the casting. From cooler to cooler. I don't think I was pointing at that. But they actually have these labeled in the bell housing itself, so that makes that pretty handy. To cooler, from cooler. Now that the transfer case is in, the vacuum lines, I had to extend mine, so I just got some vacuum line, and I got them tucked up behind the shift lever here. but the green one and the gray one needed lengthened a little bit. The two that actually hook up to these metal lines here that's supposed to be sitting right here, they actually had enough play in them that I didn't need to extend them at all. Get those out of the way for the minute. This plug here is for the reverse lights and actually was on top of the transmission earlier. Looks like I'll have to check the wiring just to be sure if there's a polarity or not. I don't think there is, because we need to get this big plug hooked up here. Sure. Nope, it does go the other way. These are tabs, so they only go on one way. And apparently, I was right the first time. Yep, there we go. And then that just plugs in there. So I'll have to double check. I think the purple wires are for the reverse lights and the red wires are for the park neutral safety switch. I'll have to double check that before I get them hooked up. And then the lever here, they don't have a lock washer and it kind of bugs me. But the shift linkage, it's set right now where this angle says it's in neutral. So I need to get a rod and actually get the shift linkage bolted to the frame. The dipstick tube fits in here pretty snugly. It's not going anywhere, and it just snakes up along the transmission, and the bracket doesn't line up with any bolts anymore. So I got it zip tied to the oil dipstick tube right now. I'll have to see if I can bend this bracket or figure something out so I can bolt it in place. On the driver's side, might have been easier to put it on the passenger side because there's a speed sensor here that it's touching. So we might have to fiddle with that a little more. We'll come back to it. And then I still need to get this sensor in the pan somehow. All I had to do on the speed sensor was undo the bolt by my thumb and just re-clock it. There really isn't, it's just held in place by that clip. Got my temperature sensor put into the transmission pan. I drilled just exactly the smallest hole possible to get that sensor in there. I have a copper washer and coated the sensor, the washer, both sides with RTV, and then the nut on the back side. I smeared RTV all over the face of that, and then dabbed a little around the outside of the nut as well on the inside. So now I have a transmission temperature sensor. The pan might not be 100% accurate, but as I mentioned, I don't want to drive the truck around with the scanner hooked up to the OSB port all the time. So when I do my test drive and calibrate the transmission, I'll see what the transmission says it is and then compare it to the gauge, and then I'll know what it is off the gauge and not have to drive around with that scan tool hooked up all the time. So I'm cutting out the kick panel underneath the steering column because I decided I'm going to French this mount in so it fits in here nice and level. I'll glue it in, probably get some putty and kind of smooth everything out. So the gauges will be tucked off to the left underneath the steering column. I got a new Chicago Electric Dremel. The other one died. And the diamond bits cut through plastic all right, but this little guy got worn pretty quick. This is some pretty thick plastic. The other thing we're working on So the other thing we're doing is we're putting a warning light in the dash for the transmission. And if you can see through there, that's where the park, reverse, neutral, drive little indicator would be. So we'll flip you around here. And there's just a hole. But this little black bracket just slots right in and bolts in. So I need to run 2 wires up to it, and then I'll have a check transmission light. And then we can get this back installed in the truck. So this is the bracket CA Convergence sends you for the throttle position sensor, which is on a cable. To bolt it to the pump somewhere. I didn't actually see any pictures or diagrams on how to do that. And I didn't do it anyways because even though mine's a manual, the bracket had a place for the kickdown cable. It already had a stud here on the throttle linkage. So that's what I used. I did have to take a pair of pliers, really kind of pinch this in here, and then use a little flathead screwdriver to pop these tabs loose, but it's a nice snug fit, and it runs along the actual throttle cable, and then there's a curve up here. This is the throttle position sensor. So I need to get it tucked up, and I'm actually going to bolt it to the firewall here, right, actually the cowl. It came with hardware to space that out. Surprising they have a locking nut here, but they don't have any locking hardware to hold the transmission to the frame. The black, purple, and gray wires are for the fuel pressure unit, or sending unit, right here in the fuel line. And then this white line, or white tube, of course, is the boost gauge. The black line is air brake line. I'm putting the onboard compressor and air on the truck since I'm in here anyways. I got to get this all zip tied together, tidied up nice. Got the plastic cover off the cowl and getting the wiper blades off and the wiper arms off. That's where I'm losing all my time, is fighting little stuff like this. Probably took me 10 minutes to futz with these to get these wiggled off. So that was kind of a pain in the ass. These have a little interesting Torx head, just a little plastic thing that threads on here. So as you can see, there's nothing in that track that I have to worry about since I'm bolting out here. And then I'll come around to this side. Yeah, there's nothing over here in the firewall for the cowl that'll affect me putting this compressor right here. So that's where that's going to live. Kind of wanted to get the hose and stuff tucked up real tight, but I think maybe we'll come down a little lower. I got new clamps to hold the wire loom and all the hose and stuff in place. So I think we're just going to come up . Got a little paint on it. Drop that one in. And of course the hard part will be getting the nut on. Guess we'll see if that sticks out long enough to catch the nut or not. Yep, I think it did. Sweet. Well, this is the little arm that actually rides on that sensor, and this wasn't Loctite in place, so it fell off. I found it. So I'm going to Loctite this and get it back on there. So you might want to check this out first before you get that mounted. Make sure this stays put. Got that little set screw Loctite in there really good and tighten the piss out of it. So hopefully it'll stay put now forever. Definitely something, if you're doing this conversion, you probably want to check is make sure. I would just take that screw out, throw some Loctite on it, put it back in place, so you don't have to worry about it falling apart. Got my shift linkage for my 4-wheel drive rigged up. Piece of all thread and a rod end at each end. We'll get under the truck and I'll show you. This is almost identical to what CA Conversion sends to hook the shift linkage up to the transmission. So I figured it would probably work for the 4-wheel drive. So let's get under there. We'll get this installed and I'll show you everything else under the truck that I've gotten finished. This is the rod end that CA Conversion sends, and it just runs from here up to the shift linkage. I need to tidy up my wiring a little bit more, get a few more zip ties on it. I had some taillight or trailer wiring that I ran for the park neutral safety switch, and just kind of bundled and zip tied it all out of the way nice and neat. These are the vacuum lines. Yeah, I need to get from this shift linkage back to the transfer case. Measured 16 inches, so that's what we are center to center. Hello everybody, Blue Dooley, and I was hoping to have a video starting this thing, but the PCM has decided it's not going to work anymore. The truck won't crank, the fuel shutoff solenoid won't actuate, and the odometer flashes because the entire instrument cluster isn't getting any information from the PCM. So I got some codes, and it looks like I'll have to have the wife take the PCM into the dealer, have them check it. Hopefully I don't need a new one. Hopefully it just needs reset or told to behave. But I'm going to go inside, shower, edit the video of the install, of getting everything installed, and unfortunately starting and driving is just going to have to wait for another video. Hope everyone had a good weekend. We'll catch you later.